He waited years just to marry a virgin, believing it would guarantee peace and happiness. But what happened after the wedding nearly destroyed everything he believed about love. Stay tuned because you are about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. Christopher Owens was the kind of man any woman would dream of marrying. At 36, he was handsome, tall, and calm-spoken. He had built a successful life in Atlanta as a respected architect, designing homes that graced some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Georgia. His suits were always perfectly ironed, his black car spotless, and his shoes clean like glass. But behind all the success was a heavy cloud hanging over his home. His mother, Margaret Owens, was sick. Very sick. She had been battling heart failure for over 3 years, and recently, the doctors said there was little more they could do. Her movements were slower, her body thinner, and her voice often came out as a whisper. Still, one thing kept her going, one last wish burning in her heart like a candle in the dark. "I want to see you married, Chris, before I leave." Every time she said it, Christopher would look away and sigh. He loved his mother deeply. She raised him alone after his father died in a car accident when Chris was only 10. She worked 2 cleaning jobs to put food on the table, gave up vacations, and even sold her wedding ring to pay for his college application. She was more than a mother, she was a fighter. But when it came to marriage, Christopher had a strict condition. A condition that had already cost him several good women. He stood by it firmly. "I will only marry a virgin." His friends often asked, "Why does it matter so much?" His answer never changed. Because a virgin woman has self-control, discipline, and respect for her body. That's the kind of woman I want to raise my children. Anything less is secondhand love. He believed that only a woman who kept her virginity until marriage could truly be trusted. To him, it wasn't about love, kindness, or loyalty. It was about purity. And that mindset had turned into a strong wall around his heart. Years back, he met Jasmine Cole, a gentle, beautiful teacher at a Christian school. She was smart, funny, and had a peaceful spirit that made him feel calm. They went on dates, shared long conversations, and even prayed together. One evening, while they sat in a quiet park, Jasmine opened up with tears in her eyes. "There's something I need you to know," she said. "I'm not a virgin. I lost it when I was 17, not because I wanted to. It was a mistake. I trusted someone who lied to me. And for years, I carried shame." She wiped her eyes, looked down, and added, "But I've grown. I've healed. And I live to please God now." But Christopher didn't even blink. He stood up slowly, stuffed his hands into his pockets, and said, "I'm sorry. I just can't. I want someone untouched." And just like that, he walked away, leaving Jasmine crying on the bench under the cold wind. His pastor tried to speak sense to him, too. "Christopher," Pastor John said one Sunday after service, "purity is a thing of the heart. Some women are virgins, but not pure. Some are not virgins, but their hearts are gold." Christopher replied with a tight smile, "With all due respect, Pastor, I've made my decision." Even his close cousin, Terry, who had married a single mom and was living happily, once pulled him aside and said, "Don't let your pride blind you, man. A good woman is more than her past." Still, Christopher didn't listen. Now, with his mother lying in a hospital bed, growing weaker by the day, he felt pressure, but not enough to change his standard. One evening, he sat by her side, spoon-feeding her warm soup. Her hands trembled slightly as she held his wrist and whispered, "Chris, I don't want to die without blessing your home. Please." Tears filled his eyes. He kissed her hand, nodded, but deep in his heart, he was still searching for the perfect virgin bride. And so the days passed, his mother's heartbeat slowed, her cheeks thinned, and time kept moving. But Christopher was waiting, still hoping to find that one woman who hadn't been touched. Still believing that was the only way to have a peaceful, honorable marriage. Little did he know, the very thing he believed would give him peace would soon tear his life apart. Christopher stepped out of the hospital that evening with his hands tucked into his coat pockets and his thoughts heavy like wet sand. The wind was cold, but his mind was burning. His mother didn't have much time. The doctors had been clear. And though he didn't say it out loud, he could feel it too. She was fading. For the first time in a long while, Christopher wasn't thinking about business, his fancy house, or even the dream woman he had in his head. He was thinking of his mother's tears, her shaking hand holding his wrist, and that whisper, "I want to see you married, Chris, please." As he drove home that night, something shifted inside him. He wasn't ready to lower his standards, but he knew he couldn't delay any longer. He told himself, "I just need to find the right virgin, and fast." 2 weeks later, he got an invitation to the wedding of an old college friend. He almost didn't go, but something about the timing pulled him in. The event was held in a beautiful church in Savannah. White walls, golden lights, and roses everywhere. As the choir sang softly, Christopher walked in and sat near the back. That's when he saw her. A young woman sitting 3 rows ahead, modestly dressed. Her long dark hair tied in a simple bun. No heavy makeup, no loud laughter, no bold jewelry. Just quiet beauty. Her name was Veronica Blake. After the reception, they met near the dessert table. She was alone, holding a glass of juice, and looking at a flower vase with calm eyes. Christopher greeted her politely. "Beautiful ceremony, isn't it?" She nodded. "Yes. I love weddings, especially when the love is real." Her voice was soft, her smile gentle. He was intrigued. They talked. And over the next week, they talked more through phone calls, coffee meetups, and short dinners. She was a 27-year-old Christian woman who sang in her church choir, didn't party, and had never been in a relationship. She told him she believed in waiting for her husband, and that she was proud of her choice. Christopher's heart almost jumped out of his chest. This was it. This was the woman he had been praying for. A real virgin. Quiet. Respectful. Church-going. It was as if heaven had answered him right on time. He rushed things. Within 3 weeks, he invited her to meet his mother at the hospital. Margaret was sitting up that day, wrapped in a warm blanket, her skin pale, but her spirit alert. Veronica walked in slowly, wearing a simple blue dress and holding a small bouquet of flowers. She knelt beside Margaret's bed and said softly, "I've heard so much about you, ma'am. It's an honor to meet you." Tears rolled down Margaret's cheeks as she reached for her hand. "You're beautiful," she said with a faint smile. Thank you for coming." Christopher stood by the door, watching with a proud grin on his face. He had done it. He had found a virgin. A woman his mother could approve. A woman he could marry. The very next day, he proposed. It wasn't fancy. No candles or violin. Just him, on one knee, in front of her apartment with a gold ring in a velvet box. Veronica looked surprised at first. But then, slowly, she smiled and nodded. "Yes, Christopher. I'll marry you." He felt like the happiest man on earth. Within a month, wedding plans began. Margaret's health became worse, and Christopher didn't want to wait. He booked a simple yet elegant garden wedding just outside the city. The invitations went out quickly. His friends were surprised at how fast he was moving, but none of them said anything. The wedding day came like a breeze. Christopher stood tall in his suit, Veronica in her white dress. They exchanged vows under a rose-covered arch, while Margaret sat in a wheelchair beside the front row, her hands trembling but her smile glowing. Everyone clapped. Everyone cheered. Christopher kissed his bride, and as they walked down the aisle, he whispered to himself, "This is it. The wait was worth it." But what Christopher didn't know was this. He had fallen in love with a label, not a person. And soon, the price of that mistake would come knocking at his door. Christopher carried Veronica across the doorway of their new home that evening, beaming with pride like a man who had just won a golden prize. He had prepared everything. The house smelled of fresh roses. The dining table was set with candles and her favorite meal, and there was soft jazz playing in the background. Even Margaret had called earlier to say, "I'm proud of you, my son. I can finally rest." Christopher felt like the most successful man alive, a beautiful wife, a proud mother, and a dream come true. But that sweet moment didn't last long. The shift began early. The very next morning, Christopher woke up and found the bed beside him empty. He walked to the kitchen, hoping to see his wife making breakfast. Instead, she was scrolling on her phone, seated with her feet up on the couch. "Morning," he said cheerfully, walking toward her. She didn't look up. "Morning." He smiled. "You want pancakes or eggs today?" "I was thinking of..." She cut him off. "I don't cook. That's what housekeepers are for." Christopher blinked. "Sorry?" She finally looked at him and said flatly, "I'm not a cooking wife, Chris. Don't expect me to be." He was confused but brushed it off. Maybe she's tired. It's just day one. But it wasn't just day one. That tone, that coldness, it continued. By the end of the first week, the smiles were gone. Veronica barely spoke to him unless she wanted something. She didn't ask about his work, didn't show interest in his dreams, and when his friends came to visit, she acted like they were disturbing her. Worse still, she had no love for Margaret. One Saturday, Christopher brought his sick mother home for a weekend visit. He wanted Veronica and Margaret to bond more, especially now that Margaret's health was getting worse. But the moment they arrived, Veronica rolled her eyes. "Why didn't you ask me before bringing her?" she said in a sharp voice. "She's my mother," he replied gently. "She won't be here long. Just 2 days." Veronica hissed under her breath and walked away. Later that night, Christopher overheard her complaining on the phone to her cousin. "This old woman is ruining my space. I didn't marry to babysit someone else's mother." The words stung him like needles, but he still tried to make it work. He bought her gifts, planned movie nights, even apologized when she shouted at him, just to keep the peace. He reminded himself that she was a virgin, the kind of woman he always wanted, and told himself marriage takes time. But the truth was getting harder to ignore. Veronica didn't want a marriage. She wanted control. She made rules. No visitors without her approval, no help for his mother, no conversations about children until she was ready. She would lock herself in the bedroom for hours, refusing to talk, and then come out and demand things as if nothing happened. She reminded him constantly, "You're lucky I waited. Most men only dream of marrying someone like me." It was as if her virginity was a trophy she held over his head, and now he owed her everything. The breaking point came one Sunday afternoon. Christopher had taken Margaret out for fresh air. She was very weak that day. Her hands shook more than usual. He wheeled her into the living room gently. Veronica stood by the TV, arms folded. "She looks worse," she muttered under her breath. Christopher frowned. "She just needs rest." Veronica stepped closer and said with a smirk, "Or maybe she just wants attention. You men love clinging to your mothers." Something inside Christopher broke. "Enough," he shouted, voice shaking. "That woman raised me alone. She gave up everything for me. Don't you dare speak about her like that again." Veronica turned away, lips tight. "Then take her back to the hospital. I didn't sign up for this pity show." That night, Margaret's chest tightened. She struggled to breathe. Christopher rushed her to the emergency room. As he sat by her hospital bed, holding her fragile hand, guilt crushed him. What had he done? He thought he was choosing peace by choosing a virgin. But now, peace felt like a stranger. And his mother, the one who begged to see him happy, was the one suffering the most. Christopher stared at the ceiling of the hospital room and whispered to himself, "I made the worst mistake of my life." Christopher sat quietly beside his mother's hospital bed, her pale hand resting in his. Machines beeped softly around them. The smell of antiseptic filled the room. A nurse came in, adjusted the 4-drip, and left without saying much. Margaret had fallen asleep after the oxygen mask was placed back on her face. But even in sleep, her eyebrows twitched, like she was still in pain. Christopher hadn't slept in 2 days. His heart was heavy with regret. He thought he had made his mother happy by marrying quickly. But now, looking at her lying weak and wounded by the same woman he brought into their lives, he felt ashamed. "How did I miss it?" he whispered to himself. "How did I think virginity meant peace?" He leaned back in the chair, rubbed his eyes, and stood up slowly. He needed air. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast golden light across the hospital garden. Christopher walked along the stone path, his thoughts running wild. He didn't want to go home. Not to that cold silence, not to Veronica's sharp tongue. Without thinking, he got into his car and began to drive. No plan. No direction. Just movement. After nearly an hour, he found himself in a quiet part of the city, one he hadn't visited in months. It was where Jasmine used to live. The memory hit him like a wave. He had left her sitting on a park bench, crying softly after he rejected her for not being a virgin. She had opened up to him, told him something deeply painful from her past. But he had chosen to walk away, with no empathy. Now he was the one hurting. Driven by something he couldn't explain, Christopher parked outside a small local bookstore. It had a warm glass front and plants by the door. He remembered Jasmine telling him once that she volunteered there on weekends. He stepped inside, and the bell above the door rang gently. There she was, seated near the back, surrounded by children, reading from a large, colorful storybook. Her voice was calm, animated, kind. The kids laughed, clapped, and leaned forward like she was their favorite part of the day. Jasmine. She looked peaceful, softer than he remembered. A woman full of grace, not bitterness, not revenge. Christopher stood there, unsure if he should say anything. But before he could decide, she looked up, and their eyes met. There was a flicker of surprise in her face, but no anger. She closed the book slowly and told the kids, "Give me a minute, okay?" Then she stood and walked toward him. "Chris," she said gently, folding her arms. "It's been a long time." He nodded, ashamed to look directly at her. "It has." There was a pause. He cleared his throat. I need to say something. Please." Jasmine nodded and gestured toward a bench near the window. They sat. Christopher took a deep breath. His voice trembled. "I was wrong, Jasmine. Deeply wrong. I judged you for something you had no control over. I put a label above your heart, and I walked away from someone who had every quality a man could hope for in a wife." He paused. Tears welled in his eyes. "I married a woman who checked a box, but ignored my soul. And now my mother's suffering. I have no peace. My home is cold. And I just needed to tell you that I'm sorry." Jasmine looked at him carefully. Her eyes were soft, not hardened. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear." Christopher wiped his eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just needed you to know." Jasmine nodded. "Chris, I did forgive you. A long time ago. I knew your heart was clouded by what the world taught you, not what love really is." Her words hit him like healing rain. They talked for over an hour. About life. About regrets. About faith. And about how people sometimes grow up believing lies until life teaches them truth. As the sun began to set, Christopher stood up and said, "I have a lot to fix, but thank you for showing me what grace looks like." Jasmine smiled. "I hope your mom feels better soon." He nodded. "She would love to see you again, honestly. She always liked you." Jasmine's smile faded just slightly, not out of pain, but out of memory. "She's a good woman. She deserves peace too." Christopher walked out of that bookstore with something he hadn't felt in months. Clarity. He had chased the wrong thing. He had chosen based on the outer shell and ignored the inner treasure. Now, he wasn't just ready to admit it, he was ready to change it. But first he had to go back. Back to the house where peace had been missing. Back to a wife who didn't love him. Only the idea of control. And back to a decision he knew he had to make, no matter the cost. The drive back home was silent. Christopher gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about appearances, pride, or what people would say. He was thinking about peace, about love, about what kind of home he wanted to build, and who he wanted to build it with. The moment he stepped into the house, he knew the atmosphere hadn't changed. Cold. Empty. Veronica was on the phone in the living room, pacing back and forth in silk pajamas. When she saw him, she ended the call quickly. "You finally decided to come home?" she asked with a sarcastic smile. I went to the hospital, he said calmly. My mother needed me. Veronica shrugged. She always needs something. I'm starting to wonder if she's really sick or just likes attention. Christopher's jaw clenched, but he didn't raise his voice. He simply said, We need to talk. She sat down, crossed her legs. Go ahead. He took a deep breath. This marriage was a mistake. Veronica's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? I rushed it. I chased something I thought would bring peace, your virginity, but I ignored everything else that matters. Respect, kindness, love, patience. You haven't just hurt me. Veronica, you've hurt my mother. And I won't allow that anymore. Her mouth fell open. So what? You're blaming me because your mother's sick? I've done nothing but. You've done nothing but dishonor her, Christopher interrupted, still calm. And treat this marriage like a trophy you earned, instead of a journey we're supposed to grow through together. She stood furious now. You can't just walk away. I gave you what you wanted. You said you wanted a virgin. You got one. He nodded slowly. Yes, I did. But I've learned something much more important. Virginity doesn't make a woman a wife. Character does. Veronica stared at him, speechless. Christopher stepped back, his voice steady. I'm filing for divorce, Veronica. I'll make sure it's peaceful. But I'm done pretending. And with that, he walked upstairs, packed a few things, and left. It was painful. It wasn't what he planned when he said, I do. But deep down, it was right. He had to let go of the lie before it destroyed everything good in his life. Weeks later, Margaret slowly recovered at the hospital. The treatments had been working, and her energy was returning, little by little. One sunny afternoon, Christopher walked into her room, holding a small basket of fruit, and behind him was Jasmine. Margaret blinked twice before a big smile lit up her face. Jasmine, she whispered, surprised and emotional. Jasmine walked forward, gently holding her hand. Hello, Ma. You look stronger. Tears filled Margaret's eyes. You came back. Christopher sat beside them. She didn't just come to visit. She's been here for me, for us, ever since I opened my eyes. Margaret looked at her son. You're smiling again. I am, he replied, because I've finally learned the truth. Jasmine looked down shyly, but Margaret squeezed her hand. That day you left, my heart broke, Margaret said softly. But now it's whole again. Jasmine stayed by Margaret's side for hours that day, reading to her, feeding her, helping with her blanket. And that night, as Christopher stood outside the hospital room looking in through the glass, his heart was full. Not with pride, not with checklists, but with peace. 6 months later, the small church in Atlanta was packed with friends and family. It wasn't a big wedding, no gold decorations or loud bands. Just love, warmth, and sincerity. Jasmine walked down the aisle in a simple white gown glowing. Christopher stood at the altar, tears in his eyes, waiting for the woman who gave him more than he ever asked for. Understanding, strength, forgiveness, and peace. Margaret, now much stronger, sat in the front row wearing a blue dress and wiping her eyes as the couple exchanged vows. I promise to love you, not for where you've been, Christopher said, his voice shaking, but for who you are and the peace you bring to my soul. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the applause filled the church. But the loudest joy came from Margaret, who whispered to herself, Now, I can rest. One evening, months after the wedding, Christopher sat on the porch holding Jasmine's hand. They watched the sunset. Margaret was asleep inside, peaceful and healthy. Jasmine laid her head on his shoulder and said, Do you still regret anything? He smiled and kissed her forehead. Only that I didn't open my eyes sooner. Then he looked up at the sky and whispered, Peace doesn't come from perfection. It comes from choosing the right heart, not the perfect past. And in that quiet moment, everything finally made sense. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Thanks for watching.